Hi, welcome to this presentation on writing collaboratively. So what is this collaborative writing thing? I put new trend here. I mean, it's not really a new trend. Um, Back when I was in college, sometimes our professors would put us in groups, usually in foreign language class. I hated it. I hated working with others um, for various reasons, mostly because I'm shy, but also because I never was comfortable putting the success of a project in someone else's hands. Bit of a control freak. Um, about 58% of writers consider collaborative writing to be very productive or productive, but 42% find it not very productive or not at all productive. We now in college ask you to work collaboratively. Do you do a lot of group work? Because you have to in the current workplace. Group writing, collaborative work is necessary for current writing projects. Information is so vast now, projects are so big. Just think of cell phone documentation. Everything from how to work on the tower to how to work on a cell phone to how the networks work. I mean, all of that information, nobody could put all of that together. I've actually worked for a company where I did cell phone documentation, and my job was they would create the documentation actually for the towers was the part that I worked on, and they would send it to Israel and to Russia to have the documentation put into back then they used, it was an old format. This was a long time ago. um, it wasn't HTML, but it was something like that. And I mean, I know we still use HTML, but you wouldn't use it today generally to put documentation in initially. And so when they would send it to these countries that didn't use our alphabet, they would put the documentation into the format, but they had no idea what letters were supposed to go where, if they cut off a word or cut off a page or whatever. So then they would send it back into this database. And so my job was to log into the database and look at each page and edit it so that words were together and letters were together. Very, very basic editing, but at the same time very complicated because it was the weirdest errors. And they would have 100 of us working on just that element of the writing process. And that was necessary because it was much more cost effective to send it to Russia or send it to Israel and then bring it back and have what they called near sourcing, low level tech writers doing this, than it was to have a company in the US do the whole process. There are advantages and disadvantages to collaboration. I mean, as I'm showing you, as I'm explaining, it draws on a greater knowledge base and on a greater skills base. It provides a better idea of how the audience will read the document. It's great to have multiple people working on a document because you know how multiple people will use the document. Our textbook, for example, that I worked on with 3 other technical writing faculty and workplace writing faculty and our instructional designer. I mean, just the fact that we had 5 subject matter experts in every aspect of this book made it so much easier and so much better. And I'm saying that, and I know, I'm sure there are places we need to improve, and we are always working on improving it. But at the same time, it's great to have multiple audience members. Collaboration improves communication among employees, and a lot of times when you join a company, you will be asked to work on a group project right away as a way to socialize you and get you used to the group work culture and to make friends. So it's a way to socialize people and help acclimate new employees to an organization. But there are disadvantages to collaboration. It takes more time than individual writing, and that was one thing I didn't like as a student. It can lead to groupthink. People can be either so convinced that if you just sit there and say yes, the meeting will be shorter and that's all that matters, that they'll just agree to anything. Or they can be convinced, I mean, some workplaces there's a lot of conflict, and they can be convinced that it's better to avoid conflict at all costs, so they just agree to everything. Or one person just says, hey, let's just do it this way, and everybody else just follows. And so that can be a problem. It can yield a disjointed document, and this is what I most often see in student collaboration projects, is that you divvy up the pieces. I'll do the introduction, I'll do the body, I'll do the conclusion, I'll do the works cited, and when you get to the end of the project, you really have 4 different documents, and that's not helpful. It can lead to inequitable workloads. This is the worst part, of course, that one person is all too happy to do the whole project just so you get an A, and everybody else just sits around. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating to the person doing all the work. Sometimes it's frustrating to people who want to learn but feel like they got shut out of the project because of this type A personality. Or maybe you have a fantastic group except for one person who just is coasting along, and it's not worth it to try to agitate that person. Just get the stuff done. So that's always a problem, and that's a problem in the workplace too. Collaboration can reduce the collaborator's motivation to work hard on a document. Sometimes people feel like if they didn't do the whole document, then it doesn't belong to them, and so they don't care. They're not motivated to make any extra effort to have a better document if they're not going to get credit for the whole thing. And of course, it leads to interpersonal conflict. I mean, people disagree about the best way to create the document or about the document itself. It can hurt the working relationship. And, so a last thing is collaborative writing often requires technology, whether it's a wiki or a project management software. And if you've never seen any project management software, go to slack.com and create a Slack for yourself and go in, and it's free and it's fun, actually. And that way, if you're ever asked, have you ever used any project management software, you can say, well, yes, I've used Slack, which most people know what Slack is. We use it in my office. So when let's say you are leading a project, let me give you tech writing. One of the aspects of tech writing and workplace communication is project management. So here's some project management basics. Define your group's task. When you get people together to have a meeting, create an agenda that lists on a piece of paper everything that's going to happen in the meeting. And define your group's task and let them know we are tasked with creating a blog to highlight employee awards every quarter. Whatever it is, and make sure everyone understands what it is. And then choose a group leader, whether it's you or someone else. And this is not the person who gets to boss people around. This is the person who's responsible and is going to lead these meetings and work toward the goal of the project. Define tasks for each group member in the very first meeting. I don't care what you have to do. Define a real task for each group member, whether it's research other people's blogs on achievements, find out how many achievements we have each quarter, find out who wins those achievements, find out if those achievements are there any other things that we should put on the blog, research the company logo and colors and talk with marketing and what can we use, find out what other groups in the company are using for their blog. Hand out a task for each group member, and do not let anyone say, oh no, that's fine, if you run out of tasks, I'll just pick up something next time, because they will be disgruntled, they will be sad that they didn't have a task, they will feel left out, they will complain, they will cause trouble, they will drop out, they won't come to the next meeting because, well, you didn't give me anything to do, so I didn't feel like I had to go, just save yourself a lot of work, give everybody a job. And establish working procedures. When and where do we meet? What procedures will we follow in meetings? How and how often are we to communicate with the leader, with the other group members, etc. Establish a procedure for resolving conflict. Are you going to come to the leader? Are you going to vote? Are you going to pass around? I mean, I've been in groups where people kept talking over each other. And so they had a football. And you could only talk if you had the football. Well, people started talking with the football and not giving it up. So they changed out the football for a kitchen timer. And you got 3 minutes. And you passed around the kitchen timer. And when your kitchen timer time was up, you had to hand over the kitchen timer and stop talking. So people kept passing around the kitchen timer. So then they made a rule you can only speak twice. So hopefully you will never be in a group like that. But you establish working procedures. How do you communicate? Establish a procedure for resolving conflict. It might involve, as I said, a kitchen timer. You create a style sheet. This is a workplace writing thing. You can Google style sheets, and it will. Your company may have one, so ask, do we have a style sheet? Your company may have a company PowerPoint that you have to use, a template. But a style sheet will tell you what font does our company use, what size, what do our headers look like, what Microsoft Office style guide do we use? Do we use contractions? How do we use British spellings or American spellings? Do we use the Oxford comma? What do our bullets look like in bulleted lists, etc. So it tells you everything you need to know about any of the questionable items when you write. Establish a work schedule. Figure out when the drop dead deadline is, the day that, oh my gosh, if it's not there, your whole team gets fired. Work back a month from that and start setting your deadlines there if you can. If you only have a month to do the project, then work back a week from there and start setting your deadlines. Always give yourself as much extra time on the end as you can because of what's called project creep. That everything will just start bogging down and creeping and you'll hit roadblocks, and so you want that extra time at the end. You don't want to go to your boss and say, project creep, but I didn't plan for it. The other thing that you have is the sitter. If this is a document that has to go through multiple audiences and multiple levels and be signed off on before it gets presented at whatever the deadline is, for example, policies that have to be approved by, the president of the company or whatever, at some point you're going to hit the sitter. And this is someone who will not move the document along, just sits on it. And I swear to goodness, I've had so many experiences with the person who sits on it. And finally, you hate to bother people and you hate to be pushy, but it's like, we've got a week. This has got to move. And I call the person. I'm like, have you given any thought to our document that we sent? Do you feel that you can approve it? Do you have any questions? And the person comes back and says, what document? Oh gosh, I was cleaning out my dishwasher and accidentally washed it. It's like, oh my God, are you serious? So I sound like my niece when I said that. Oh my God, are you serious? I sound like my niece. But anyway, that happens. So for all those reasons, don't make your final deadline and your project deadline the same. And create evaluation materials. It looks good for you when you're talking to your manager to say, and we will evaluate our team's participation in this project, with a questionnaire that we will distribute to the team about not only satisfaction with each other, but satisfaction with the leadership and satisfaction with the way the project was handled. And also, how will you evaluate the success of the document? If you're creating instructions for how to file a 75R61 form for ABC Company, then will you have usability tests? Will you watch people use it? Will you send out a survey after it's been in place for a month and ask people, did this work for you? What can we fix? So think about evaluation materials, both internal to the group and external with the use of the document. It looks good if you think about that stuff and share that we're going to evaluate this. So when you have your meeting, there are different things that are part of a meeting. Listening effectively. You don't want to be sitting in a meeting, and we see this all the time with people who are not listening. They are simply thinking about what they can say next. You don't want to be that person. And in fact, one way to listen effectively and to communicate that you are listening effectively is to come into a meeting with a pencil and paper or a pen and paper or a laptop or whatever it is that you're going to take notes on, and actually take notes. Do not come in with the laptop and play on Facebook. You actually can tell when people are doing that. And don't come in with a phone and start playing on Facebook or checking your texts or whatever during a meeting. Now, hopefully you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, you actually thought you had to tell me that. I hope you're appalled that I would even say such a thing. But sadly, in every environment I've ever worked in, there was someone who really needed to know that you go to a meeting and you listen. You listen to what other people say. You contribute to the conversation in a polite, respectful, effective, and efficient manner, not just to hear yourself talk. And you write down what other people say and take notes, if for no other reason than to communicate in more than one way that you are listening. If you do take your phone in to take notes on, which I have done before because battery died in an iPad, I tell people I am taking notes on this phone. Feel free to check them at any time. I am listening. I am taking notes. And then I take notes, of course. So listen effectively and communicate that clearly. Set your group's agenda and stick to it. An agenda is when you come into a meeting and it has a list of what's going to be discussed, items that will be discussed in the order that they will be discussed. And you go through the agenda, point 1, point 2, point 3. Stick to it. Now, there is a rule that if you bring up something that's not on the agenda, that you have to either, ask the group to agree to add it to the agenda or call a separate meeting. And I have worked with people who were like, okay, well, we're talking about what we're bringing to Sally's party. Oh, I didn't put on the agenda what to bring for dessert, so we'll have to have another meeting for that. Oh, no, don't have another meeting for that. Just say, hey, can we throw that on there too? But if it's Sally's party and then it's Brenda's party, then that's a separate meeting. So that's the purpose of the agenda, to sort of, promise people that this meeting will end, I swear. When you are having a meeting, arrive on time. If you know that you're going to miss a meeting, let the group leader know as soon as possible. Stick to the agenda. Record important decisions made at the meeting. One person will serve as a secretary, that's the term, and will make a record of the meeting, focusing on who is there, what time it started, any decisions the group makes, and any tasks to be carried out after the meeting. These are called meeting minutes. Minutes of a meeting. Summarize what your accomplishments were and make sure every member understands what his or her assignment is, and again, make sure everyone has an assignment. You want to communicate diplomatically. You want to listen carefully. You want to set aside any preconceptions based on the speaker's age or race or appearance or sex. Maintain eye contact with the speaker, not to stare him or her down, but do pay attention to the ideas and not the words themselves. I don't think that I have to tell you, accents. Everybody has an accent. As someone who came from Arkansas, I am very aware that my accent, I have a thick Southern accent. I go to France and I go to Germany and I speak German and French, and my French is actually quite good. It sounds good because I learned to pronounce things well. My German, I actually did exchange student work with a Bavarian family, and they had a very thick Bavarian accent, and so my German, it sounds about like my English. It has a thick Southern accent. And that kind of freaks people out because they don't think that's what's going to come out of an American. Well, they don't expect German usually to come out of an American's mouth. But then they turn to English and I speak and they look at me and they're like, I do not. You're speaking English, but it's not English. And I have to explain to them I have a very thick accent. Now, you guys may not notice it because you may have an accent and you're used to Southern accents. And if you want to know how this feels, of course, if you've never left the South, all you have to do is, drive about a day north and you too can have people stare at you and say, oh my goodness, you talk really funny. We all know about people who speak English differently. There are many varieties of English. Don't get distracted by a variety of English, whether it's because it's not that person's first language or they're just from a different English-speaking country or English-speaking region. Examine the speaker's use of evidence and logic. Compare the speaker's message with what you already know about the subject. Think of questions you might ask later, because that's very polite and helps people to feel that they've done a good job speaking. And it sends a good impression of you if you ask intelligent questions. But do be kind to people. Don't get hung up on accents. Let the speaker finish. Don't interrupt. Please don't interrupt. I actually sat through a meeting a few weeks ago where another speaker constantly interrupted everyone, and it was very frustrating. And just a little point of business etiquette. Relationships in the business world are predicated on rank and nothing else. And this particular meeting, there were 3 high-ranking members of the organization there, and there were some mid-level members of the organization there, and there were some team members, some entry-level members of the organization there. And one of the entry-level members constantly interrupted one of the upper-level members. And the upper-level member was so shocked at this behavior, everyone was just like, what the devil is going on? Don't interrupt. I actually went back to my office and told some of my team members, I don't ever want to see you interrupt anyone in a meeting, but especially not an upper-level member of the team. It's terrible. Avoid personal remarks and insults. Be tolerant and respectful of other people's views and working methods. It's right both ethically and practically. It's ethical to treat people respectfully as you want them to treat you, and it is practical. If you anger people, you are picking a fight that is not just for this meeting or just for this issue, but for the rest of your time together. Once you've made someone mad, you may, be sorry it happened, or you may be gleeful that you've prickled somebody. But then you go on with your life, and that person sits around and thinks of ways to make your life miserable for the rest of your time together. So, don't mess with people. Don't overstate your position either. When you're talking in groups, you're talking in a meeting, when you say, my plan is a sure thing, this is what we have to do, you may be confident, it may be a great plan, but the way you're communicating it is overbearing, and it won't get you where you want. Instead, try to be more diplomatic. I think this is a good plan. I think this is what we need to do. What do you guys think? Now that last bit, what do you guys think? That's a tag. It's called a tag. It's more often used by females than males. And by some males, it is seen as a sign of weakness, that you're not sure of yourself, so you're asking questions. For some people, it's seen as a way to get group buy-in and motivate a group. So it just depends on who you're working with and how they feel about such things. Be aware of that. If you're the only woman in the group, avoid tags, because it probably will be seen as a lack of confidence. Don't get emotionally attached to your own ideas. When you meet opposition, try to understand why other group members don't agree with you. Ask, why won't this work? Actually, when I was in Ohio, I was a member of a team, and we were supposed to do blah and blah and blah. And so we're in the meeting, and I'm like, guys, we just need to do X. Why aren't we doing X? And everybody just kept looking at me and going on to some other topic. And finally, I'm like, okay, guys, I kept saying do X. Why are we not doing X? And somebody said, well, Tammy, because X is illegal in Ohio. It was some weird random law, like you can't, cross the street without blowing your car horn 3 times or something. It was some weird thing, but they all knew it. So there was a really good reason why nobody was jumping on my idea. So don't get too emotionally attached to your ideas, and definitely ask, why aren't we doing X? Actually, that came up the other day. Somebody was like, we need to do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, that would be against the law in the state of Georgia. And it was a random thing. It wasn't like we should kill people. It was like we should run Monday, Wednesday, Friday hybrid classes. And it was like, well, that's against the law. But it wasn't that. It was something else equally just random. Ask pertinent questions. Questions are good. Don't be afraid that you will appear ignorant. It also helps other people examine what they've heard. Pay attention to nonverbal communication, even if people are smiling and nodding or they say they understand. If you see them like looking all confused, ask them, are you confused? Hey, maybe they just have gas and they really wanted you to point that out, but that's a joke. But still, it's good to ask. The other thing is when you ask questions, don't ask questions just to hear yourself talk. That happens in meetings. When you critique a group member's work or a group member's draft, as an English professor, I critique a lot of drafts. And so here are my tips for you. If Bob says, hey, will you look at my writing? You're doing Bob a favor, and it's nice of you to look at Bob's writing. And here are some tips. Start with a positive comment. Even if the draft is weak, you might say, well, you put a lot of work into this. Thanks. Or this is a really good start. Or I really particularly like the way you did X because there is something good in there. There is. And so point that out first. Because people are nervous about their writing. They want to see something good first. Discuss the larger issues first. Let's say, and this would of course never happen in real life, but let's just say you have a draft in front of you and it is a train wreck. No word is spelled correctly. The conclusion is at the top. The topic is wrong. You're like, oh my gosh. All you can say is, you have really nice handwriting, Joan. Like, that's all you can do, right? Don't go through and pick everything apart. Discuss the larger issues first. The first thing you'll start with, hey, Joan, you have put a lot of time into this, and I really appreciate it. Let's talk about the topic. How did you come to choose how to create a papier-mâché piñata in order to help solve our problem of the leaky faucet downstairs? And let Joan tell you, and then say, well, I appreciate your train of thought, and can you come back next week maybe with something about the leaky faucet downstairs? Try to be a little more specific, not sound so sarcastic, but that's my gift. Don't make it yours. But discuss the larger issues first. Now, once you've got the topic narrowed down, and then you might talk about the next visit, you might talk about organization and development, and then the next visit you might talk about logic and evidence, and the next visit you might talk about design and use of graphics, the next visit you might talk about paragraph development, and then you might talk about sentence level matters, and then you might talk about how to spell words correctly. So go top down. Please note too, when I give you feedback on your drafts, you're not going to come back multiple times. You don't even want to come back multiple times. I'm your teacher. I know that. Now you can. You're welcome to. But I am going to throw everything at you. Because most students say, please, don't not tell me stuff. But in the working world with your coworkers, when they ask you to look at a draft, if there are a lot of problems, go slow and easy. Talk about the writing, not the writer. Instead of, you don't explain clearly why this is relevant, say, I'm not sure I understand this. Can you explain to me what you're trying to say here? Focus on the group's document, not the group member's draft. So instead of thinking about, you need to take a writing class, think about, we need a draft on how to operate X copier. What can I do to help this fit into that project? You may not be able to help that person's writing in the big picture, but just get the project done. With minutes, taking minutes at a meeting, if you are designated to be the secretary and to take the minutes, an important thing to do is to make sure you put down the date of the meeting, the time of the meeting, when it started, who was there. The important decisions that were made, usually people use the agenda and they go through and they make notes on the agenda, and that becomes the meeting minutes, the secretary does. And make sure that you do not get into the nitty-gritty. We don't need to know that Bill called Bob, a butthead or whatever. We just need to know that Bill and Bob discussed X and it was resolved that they would pick up the discussion next time. Unless they're, the group voted and blah blah was decided. Mary made a motion and Susan seconded and Patricia concluded the meeting. Those sorts of things. We don't need to know that, Sally and Jeff got into a fist fight. Because you'll read those minutes for the next meeting. Everybody reads the minutes. And if you bring up that old disagreement, you're just going to have that disagreement again. Plus it reflects, these minutes reflect on the organization, and you don't want, official records of things that don't look nice. Gender and collaboration. Effective collaboration involves two related challenges: maintaining the group as a productive, friendly working unit, and accomplishing the task. What we found with gender and collaboration is that, well, first of all, when we talk about gender, we're generalizing. I can talk about, in general, women do X, Y, and Z, and then I can turn around and tell you 3 examples that, prove the rule. So, or the exceptions, 3 exceptions that prove the rule. So, we're not talking about particular people, we're talking about in general. So, what we find is that women are better at keeping the group together and keeping it cohesive and keeping it social, and men are better at moving the group toward the goal. Women, as I said, are more likely to use qualifiers and tag questions. Men do not generally use qualifiers and tag questions. What we've also found is that when we have a mix of men and women in a team, the team functions best. So a group of all men or a group of all women, they can certainly get jobs done, but if you can have a mixed gendered group, you will have a more effective and efficient working team. That is what we know from the review of the literature. There are some, again, generalities in that men are often socialized to feel that it's not getting done unless someone is standing up and making it happen, that a leader has to stand up and a leader has to push the team. That can come off as overly aggressive or boorish to other people, particularly women. Sometimes men report being annoyed by the fact that women will come to a group meeting and will immediately start talking about what they had for lunch or their families, and it's like, this isn't meeting business, stop talking about that. They're establishing group coherence, women are, which will actually make the group more effective and it will have people in the group, they will buy in. So that is actually not unnecessary chatter, although of course it does have to stop and the meeting has to start. There is a trend in meetings that you can observe that women may talk less and men may talk over women. Please, if you are a group leader, whether you are male or female, do not let people talk over other people, whether they are male or female. It is a bad dynamic. Everybody notices and everybody expects the leader to make it stop. Probably the person talking over other people doesn't notice. And so it's good to just say in general, okay, we're not going to talk over other people. We're all going to have a term. And you may bring out that old lemon timer. With culture and collaboration, we have a lot of multicultural collaboration today. Most collaborative groups in industry and the classroom include people from many, many cultures, and that's always a challenge. It's good. It gives you, diversity does create a better product. Different people working together create a higher quality product. But do be aware, if you're working with people from other cultures, that there are communication styles. In some cultures, people don't respond with a definite no. People don't admit when they're confused. They don't ask for clarification. They may avoid criticizing others. They may avoid initiating new tasks or performing creatively. Another thing that you may have to watch, this is a gender and culture collaboration, is there are some cultures where men do not take seriously tasks assigned to them by women. And so if you find that's happening in your group, you may talk to that person. If you have a man who is from another culture and has not understood that in this culture, when a woman asks you to do something as a leader in a group, says, will you please do that you are expected to do that task, it may be necessary to pull that person aside and say, hey, do you understand that? Just want to clarify. And then if you're still having the problem, you may have to decide, do we have to then have a man assign this man tasks? Is that the only way we're going to get this done? If this person is a visiting employee for a month from somewhere, that might be the best thing. If this is someone who's going to have to work with women year after year, then you definitely want to try to help him understand. So that happens. There are some cultures where, depending on the class status of a person, male or female, he or she may always feel that whatever tasks are assigned to him or her will be delegated to someone else without him or her having to actually do stuff. That's very frustrating when they come back and they're like, well, I just didn't think you meant I had to do it. And so that's another time when it's like, well, you have to explain to that person, yes, we are asking you to actually do the things we ask you to do. I know it's weird, isn't it? There are meeting styles where everyone talks and responds, where everyone nods and says, oh, wow, and makes noise when a person talks. There are meeting styles where everyone sits there and stares politely. If you're from one meeting style and you're in another meeting, be aware they're not staring you down. They don't dislike you. That's just the way that group of people responds. If you're in a meeting where everyone's responding and nodding all the time, you might feel like they're interrupting you or they're not taking you seriously, but that's actually supposed to be, that's politeness. They're responding to you. So also think about privacy. Privacy is an odd thing. Personal questions vary from culture to culture. You might ask, for example, someone from Japan about his or her major and the courses he or she is taking, and those may actually feel like personal questions to a Japanese person, which to us in the US is not personal at all. On the other hand, in the South and in the American South, it's often very appropriate. No, okay, I'm not going to say appropriate, but common to ask people their religion, which in most parts of the world is not appropriate at all. So it's a cultural thing, and just try to be aware and don't jump to conclusions. If you like this sort of thing, there are various books on hand gestures, international hand gestures, that like the OK sign in the US is like a horribly rude sign in other places. And so you might find that interesting. So that brings us to the end of people and collaboration and working collaboratively, and I hope you've enjoyed it and happy collaborating.